Hello, my name is Haven, and I am a technician at the Cultural Resource Institute at Juniata College.
The CRI lab is where archaeological artifacts are processed and stored. There's always a new collection coming in and a lot of things to do. Today, I'll be showing you one of the many steps a collection goes through before it is sent to a larger establishment, like a museum. We'll be focusing on lithic artifacts, so anything that I cover in this video might be different for other types of objects such as metals, ceramics, or textiles. Let's get started. The most important thing you want to have when labeling artifacts are the artifacts themselves. Next, we have the two vials of lacquer we'll be using, B72 and B67. These will form the base coat and top coat for each label. These lacquers dry clear, so for some artifacts, a white acrylic makes more sense. The white acrylic is used in place of the B72 when necessary. The lacquers have corresponding solvents as well, acetone for the bottom coat and naphtha for the top coat. These are important to have on hand in case you need to fix your label or just start over completely. You can use the acetone for the white acrylic as well. When you wipe off a layer of lacquer or acrylic, you should use paper towels or cotton balls, so have those ready to go too. You'll need a small, flexible ruler for measuring artifacts. And you're going to need a special type of pen for labeling them. I use Pigma Micron archival quality pens. You can see how fine the tip is. Since we'll be labeling things that are only an inch square in size, teeny tiny writing is important. Finally, we have our mag light. Having a good magnifying glass is crucial for labeling artifacts. That's not going to cut it. The mag light is your best friend when it comes to labeling. It makes writing on small rocks much more bearable. As the name suggests, the mag light has a light component which can be adjusted for brightness. As a quick aside, the curation guidelines for archaeological collections compiled by the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission is a handy guide for any questions you have while labeling. But unless you run into something weird, this video should provide you with the essential information you'll need for labeling lithic artifacts. Let's get started. We'll begin by choosing which artifacts to label. The rule of thumb is that anything over 1 square inch gets a label, so an artifact that is 1 inch long by 1 inch wide gets a label, and an artifact that is 1 1/4 inches by only 3/4 of an inch will get a label too. Use your ruler to check the artifact's measurements until you develop an eye for what needs a label and what doesn't. This process may require you to pour out a bag of artifacts and sort through them to find ones of appropriate size. This seems like a lot of work, but hopefully by this point some of that work will be done for you. Before artifacts are labeled, they're usually analyzed and grouped into size classes, 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can almost always leave out class 1 and 2 artifacts when labeling, although it never hurts to take a closer look. And remember, always keep your artifacts with their respective bags throughout all parts of the labeling process. The next step is to choose which part of the artifact gets labeled. Look closely at the artifact. You want a relatively wide, flat surface to work with. You should always avoid diagnostic features if you can while labeling. For example, the ridges on this stone flake can tell archaeologists about how this piece broke off of its parent rock or how it was reshaped over time. And if we factor in where this flake was found, we can tell a lot about what the prehistoric people there might have been doing. So if this makes you want to scream, remember that archaeologists feel the same way about this. So, now that we know where we're putting the label, let's apply the base coat with the B72 or white acrylic. Some artifacts have very rough and uneven surfaces, which can make them hard to label. Practice makes perfect with these things, but I would also recommend making the base coat extra thick on these artifacts, so the lacquer can basically make the writing surface for you. If you do make a mistake, let's say you labeled in a bad spot or just made a total mess, it's okay. Don't get frustrated, just take a breath and go find your acetone. Start by applying the acetone to the cotton ball. Acetone evaporates almost instantly, so using a paper towel with a high surface area will not help you out here. The cotton fibers trap in the liquid and hold it for a bit longer while you're dealing with your screw-up. Once the surface of the artifact is no longer sticky, use the paper towel to wipe away any remaining strands of cotton, and start over. Once you're happy with your base coat, set your artifact out to dry. It will need a couple hours to dry completely, so take this time to put a base coat on a few more artifacts, enough to fill a tray. You'll know the base coat is dry when it's no longer sticky or squishy to the touch. Let's move on to the actual label writing. An artifact label usually consists of the provenience information already on its bag. On the top is the site number, and below the crossbar is the artifact's catalog number. If the bottom number includes a decimal, that means it's an artifact of particular interest, often called a specimen. If you don't have these numbers, just record what you do have, like the place the artifact was recovered from and when it was found. So, using the Maglite and your trusty pen, copy this information onto the base lacquer. Write as small and legibly as you can. Be especially careful with numbers that look the same, like 4s and 9s or 6s and 0s, and be sure your decimals are clearly there. If you're done and you don't like the way it looks, you can usually wipe away the ink with your finger or a paper towel and try again. Acetone can also remove the ink, but it will dissolve part of your base coat and make it goopy again, so try to avoid doing this. In time, you will become more comfortable wielding the pen, so be patient and don't give up. Another thing to consider is the life of your pen. I tend to write with the side rather than the tip of the pen, and this gradually wears it down. Keep an eye on this and how your labels look. If you're finding that your numbers are getting larger or sloppier, try writing with the other edge of your pen or just get a new one. When you're happy with your labels, go ahead and put those on a tray as well. These will need a few hours to dry completely, so take this time to get out another set of artifacts and put base coats on those. The key to efficient labeling is consistent turnover between the bottom coat, written label, and top coat. To move this process along a little bit faster, keep an oscillating fan nearby and an open window. The CRI lab doesn't get much air circulation, so keep a nice breeze on your artifacts if you can. You'll know the ink is dry if you can lightly touch the label and the ink doesn't come off on your finger. Just try not to smudge the ink on purpose. Give the ink the longest amount of time to dry that you can. Even if you think it's dry, it might not be yet, and if you don't give the ink enough time and you apply the top coat too early, the ink can wick away, which is not great, and you'll probably have to end up writing the whole label over again. Once you're confident that your labels have dried, it's time to put on the top coat. If you make a mistake at this point, you're still okay. Just use the naphtha and a cotton ball to remove the B67. This shouldn't affect the ink if it's dry, so don't worry about that. Allow the top coat to dry completely. Because this is the last step, I like to wait overnight just to be sure. At this point, you should be moving along in the little assembly line that you've made, adding the base coat to one tray and labeling the next. Again, test the top coat with your finger. If it isn't squishy or sticky, the artifact is ready to be returned to its bag, master bag, and storage container.
Okay, so to wrap up, I'd like to leave you with 3 main points to remember while you're working. Number 1, legibility is key, so always remember to take your time. Number 2, allow ample drying time between each coat of lacquer and ink. And number 3, mistakes are okay, there's always a way to fix a mess up. And that's it. Thank you very much for watching, and happy labeling.